Poštovani gledalci, dobrodošli u još jedno izdanje emisije Granice Istoka. Ja sam Harun Karčić. Sukob interesa u istočnom Mediteranu odvija se u regiji opterećenoj brojnim neriješenim pitanjima, među kojima su raspodjela prirodnih resursa, status Kipra, demarkacija mora, status otoka, ratovi u Libiji i Siriji te druge borbe za utjecaj. Slabljenjem američkog utjecaja i stvaranjem sigurnosnog vakuma, evropske zemlje poput Francuske nastoje popuniti tu prazninu. Turska, kao zemlja sa najdužom obalom na Sredozemlju, želi veća prava za sebe i smatra da je susjedne države žele marginalizirati. Koliko je taj sukob povezan sa pitanjem Kipra, koliko sa energentima i demarkacijom mora, analiziramo u današnjoj emisiji. Prije razgovora sa našim gostima, pogledajmo uvodni prilog o najnovijim dešavanjima u istočnom Mediteranu.
Istočni Mediteran je novo veliko nalazište nafte i plina. Tu su plinska polja Leviatan i Tamara duž izraelske obale, polje Zohra u Egiptu te Afrodita koju su otkrili kiparski Grci. Podvodno bogatstvo ove regije privlači i Tursku koja ovisi o uvozu energenata. Međutim, projekat osporava Grčka, što će ponovno dovesti do napetosti na Kipru. Otok Kipar podijeljen je na grčki i turski dio uslijed turske vojne intervencije 1974. godine nakon vojnog udara koji su podržale grčke vlasti. I turska i međunarodno priznata vlada kiparskih Grka polažu prava na eksploataciju nafte i gasa na moru u istočnom Mediteranu. Međutim, stručnjaci kažu da bi politika trebala biti u drugom planu kada je riječ o komercijalnoj koristi ovih projekata. Turske vlasti tvrde da žele energetsku neovisnost, a ubrzana istraživanja dio su tog plana. Također, do kraja godine Turska će za te svrhe u vode Mediterana poslati još jedno specijalizirano plovilo.
Ovo je karta Egejskog mora. Sa desne strane je Turska, sa lijeve Grčka. Između te dvije države nalazi se više od 2000 otoka, a neki su popularna turistička odredišta. Svi ovi otoci pripadaju Grčkoj, iako su neki samo 2 km od turske obale. Također, gotovo cijelo Egejsko more i zračni prostor pripadaju Grčkoj. Ako jedan turski brod želi ploviti od Istanbula do Izmira, mora proći kroz grčke teritorijalne vode. Isto je i sa zračnim prostorom. Ova linija označava grčki zračni prostor koji se nalazi tik uz tursku obalu. Drugim riječima, Turska, zemlja sa najdužom obalom na Sredozemlju, ima najuži pristup moru. Današnje stanje između te dvije države uređeno je Luzanskim sporazumom iz 1923. godine kada je Turska kao nasljednica poraženog Osmanskog carstva potpisala mirovni sporazum kojim su regulirane njene granice. Ostali otoci, poznati kao Dodekanski otoci, bili su pod italijanskom upravom sve do 1947. godine kada su predati Grčkoj nakon potpisivanja ugovora u Parizu iste godine. Tako je otok Castellorizo, koji se nalazi samo 2 km od Turske i gotovo 600 km od grčke obale, pripao Grčkoj. Ista je situacija sa ostalim otocima poput Lesbosa i Kosa. To je jedan od glavnih razloga gnjeva među Turcima danas, bez obzira na političku ili ideološku orijentaciju. Drugi razlog dugogodišnjih tenzija Turske i Grčke je Kipar. Naime, nakon vojnog udara kiparskih Grka 1974. godine, koji su imali za cilj pripajanje cijelog Kipra Grčkoj, Turska je poslala vojsku da zaštiti tursku manjinu na sjeveru otoka. Tako je nakon rata uspostavljena Turska republika Sjeverni Kipar, a na jugu Republika Kipar, koja je većinski grčka. Sukcesivne turske vlade decenijama negoduju što je Grčka republika Kipar međunarodno priznata i članica Europske unije, a Tursku republiku Sjeverni Kipar niko osim Ankare ne priznaje. Treći razlog napetosti na Mediteranu su isključive ekonomske zone, odnosno različita tumačenja međunarodnog pomorskog prava. Naime, Grčka tvrdi da svaki njen otok ima ne samo teritorijalni morski pojas 12 nautičkih milja od obale, već i isključivu ekonomsku zonu do 200 nautičkih milja od obale. Prema tom tumačenju, grčki otok Castellorizo imao bi pravo na isključivu ekonomsku zonu koja je čak 4000 puta veća od površine samoga otoka i koja bi znatno suzila turski isključivi ekonomski pojas. Turska se tome protivi jer kaže da otoci imaju pravo samo na teritorijalne vode, a ne na isključive ekonomske zone. Detaljnije o tome kako Atina gleda na razvoj situacije pojašnjava vam Nikolaos Tsifakis, profesor međunarodnih odnosa koji nam se uključuje iz Atine. Professor, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now let me begin by asking you, why would energy deposits be a bone of contention between Greece and Turkey if oil and gas prices have slumped in recent months?
Thanks for the invitation. The dispute is mistakenly presented in the media as if it concerns energy reserves. This is not the case. It is true that President Erdogan uses the deposits of energy reserves as an argument to his domestic audience at a time in which the Turkish economy is in a bad state. However, the dispute is about sovereign rights. It all commenced in late 2019 when Turkey and the Tripoli-based government in Libya signed an agreement for the delimitation of the maritime borders that entirely disregarded all the Greek islands in the Aegean Sea.
Now, but Turkish media often refer to the 1920 Sevres and the 1923 Lausanne Treaty. A retired Turkish admiral recently told me that Greece's, Egypt's and Cyprus's exclusive economic zones would marginalize Turkey and amount to a second Sevres Treaty. What is the view from Athens?
Okay, Greece has done nothing more than exercise diplomacy in observation of international law. It reached out to its neighbors, to Italy and Egypt, and requested the delimitation of maritime borders. This happened peacefully in accordance with international law. This is also what Greece proposes to Albania, and the same invitation is also extended to Turkey on the condition that negotiations will not take place under the threat of the use of military force. If Greece and Turkey cannot agree through negotiations on the delimitation of their continental shelves and exclusive economic zones, Greece proposes to submit the difference to the International Court of Justice. So your program's audience may wonder why Turkey does not want to wage talks without the threat of the use of lethal force, and why it rejects the recourse to international justice. Now, as for the Treaty of Serbs that you mentioned, President Erdogan used it to foment Turkish nationalism and the people's sense of injustice. He nurtures a science mentality at a time when Turkey is increasingly isolated internationally as it acts as a rogue state. So when President Erdogan requested a revision of the Treaty of Lausanne, he struggles against the legacy of the founding father of modern Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, and he also prepares the ground to lay claims on the country's neighbors.
So do you believe that Ankara is planning to lay claims to certain Aegean islands that today belong to Greece?
Well, there have been calls like yesterday's youth party of MHP that mentioned directly that this should extend to the Turkanish or elsewhere. But officially, Turkey, what puts in question is the rights of islands, whether islands have a continental shelf and exclusive economic zone. The things are very clear. There is Article 121 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas that stipulates that islands sustaining human habitation or economic life have territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, a continental shelf.
That was exactly my next question. What happens if a country such as Turkey is not a signatory to the 1982 law of the UN Law of the Seas Convention?
This is true. But the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea has 168 parties and is considered universally accepted.
Right.
But in any case, Turkey can, as Greece proposed, bring the claim to the International Court of Justice. The fact that it's no signatory can be taken into consideration, and a verdict will come out.
Now, this issue has erupted in the past a number of times since the 1960s, but also more recently in 1996. But this time, Egypt, the Emirates, France, and Israel have expressed their support to Athens. Now, judging from the past decades, what is the likelihood of this conflict heating up further?
If I may, I would like to add that all EU members have expressed their solidarity to Greece and actually considering the application of sanctions towards Turkey. Also, the United States, the State Department, has repeatedly stated in recent months that the USA acknowledged the sovereign rights of Greek inhabited islands. So the list of countries that disapprove Turkey's position is very long. Now, on your question, I do not think that any side wants an open war. The Turkish economy is in a dire state, and President Erdogan would like to avoid EU sanctions. Still, it is my opinion that he has gone too far this time, and there is no easy way for him to save face. Also, we should not underestimate the danger of an incident or an accident that may get out of control. We should not forget that a month ago, an unintended collision took place between a Greek and a Turkish warship. There is too much lethal power assembled in a small location, and the production of the crisis tests the nerves of deployed officers in both sides. So this is quite dangerous. So although both countries would like to avoid a war, we should, as long as the stalemate continues, there's always a danger of an unintentional accident that can derail things.
Right, Professor Tsifakis, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
The pleasure was all mine. Okay. Thank you.
Poštovani gledalci, bio je to Nikolaos Tsifakis, profesor međunarodnih odnosa koji nam se uključio iz Atine. A Kipar je zamrznuti sukob koji je i dalje izvor tenzija između Turske i Grčke. Na sjeveru žive Turci, na jugu Grci. Kako je došlo do te podjele? Saznajte u grafici koja slijedi. A kako na situaciju gledaju kiparski Turci, pojašnjava nam stručnjak za međunarodne odnose Serkan Birgel, koji nam se uključuje iz Nikozije. Serkan, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel. Now, let me begin by asking you, relations between Ankara and Athens have been strained recently over energy prospecting in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, does Turkey believe that the EU can be an impartial mediator in the role between Ankara and Athens?
Regrettably, I think the answer tends towards no. And the reason for that is that before, I think a few years ago, the EU did slap punitive sanctions on Turkey to, I think, TPAO officials last time that tensions festered. I know from European officials that European foreign policy is the sum of its parts, but the Greek Cypriots and the Greeks are part of that system. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the other member states. But the Greeks and Greek Cypriots are trying very hard to induce sanctions on Turkey. As I hear, they are also blocking measures against Belarus. So I think that there is a gamble of sanctions going on, a bargaining of sanctions. I think also Turkey doesn't quite trust the European Union to be able to play the system or the game with a straight bat.
Mm-hmm. Now? Why is Turkey determined to diversify its energy resources now when for years they have had a steady supply of gas from Russia, from Azerbaijan, from Iraq and from Iran?
The idea is to increase one's energy security, so they want to diversify supply. which they have done so via the use of liquefied natural gas or LNG, but they want to be able to have optionality, as many options as possible. And when they have more options, they can negotiate better with the Russians, for example. And when they have their own natural gas, if they can develop it and bring it to market within the next, I don't know, a few years or within the next decade or so, that will increase their position all the more, and it would help them with their foreign current account deficit, which does cause a lot of economic problems in Turkey as well.
Right, but this comes at a time when oil and gas prices have dropped to historic lows.
Yes. When you have, for example, oil and gas prices, particularly LNG, Turkey aims to buy more of that and store it. But we don't know, for example, what the future is going to hold. Maybe there might be a rebound in the industry. The industry is quite highly cyclical. So we may see an increase in price going forward into the future. However, Turkey is inordinately dependent on external energy resources. So anything that it can do to lower the costs is a good thing for Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Now, the AK Party seems to be somewhat milder in its tone towards Greece and Cyprus compared to the ultra-nationalist MHP party, which is AK's coalition partner. Now, is the MHP calling the shots today, and are they the ones advocating the blue homeland doctrine?
It's more complex than that. So Turkey is quite united in this issue when it comes to defending its sovereign rights, as it says, in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, but also championing the Turkish Cypriot cause in Cyprus. So you have, for example, opposition government members, opposition party members, from the CHP to the MHP. They're all quite united behind this issue of the Turkish state, as they call it. So it's not a party issue, but a state issue. And when you have, for example, the blue homeland doctrine, that was created by what are called Kemalist thought leaders. But Kemalist also can be used as a derogatory term, like Islamist, for example. And, you know, if someone is interested in state and statecraft in Turkey, they're likely to be, derided as Kemalist. Whereas anyone, for example, who's a religious conservative is likely to be derided as an Islamist. So we have to be quite careful with these terms and see, for example, how much broad support there is across the Turkish political spectrum.
So you're saying that there is a lot of support among the Turkish public and politicians for a greater Turkish presence in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Not necessarily a greater presence, but only, for example, its fair share. So, for example, especially off the island of Kastellorizo or Mayas, Turkey has a very strong claim when it comes to maritime boundary delimitation. Other parts is a weaker claim. But, for example, Turkey is only responding, in my opinion, to, for example, the Greek Cypriot attempts to pass the East Med pipeline without Turkish consent, or without the Turkish view, or this idea that Turkey is being ostracized from the Eastern Mediterranean. This didn't start with Turkey, unfortunately. And when we have, for example, these EEZs or maritime boundary delimitation maps that only show, for example, the Greek perspective, it does touch a lot of nerves here in Turkey. So I think the idea is a response to the ostracization that is felt by Turkey, which is why they are being so active.
Now, how has it come to this that Turkey has been left without any major allies in the East Med, while Greece on its side has the Emirates, France, Israel, and Egypt, and the Republic of Cyprus?
I think it is something that came along at the right time. So, for example, the Greek Cypriots have leveraged any tension that Turkey has with anyone to their benefit. Even though, for example, with the East Med pipeline, it is not something that is very, is going to come to fruition anytime soon. It's more of kind of project or an idea at the moment rather than anything empirical. The Greek Cypriots have managed to use that as a platform to draw in, for example, as you said, the UAE, Israel, Egypt in particular, against Turkey. So they're leveraging tensions everywhere that exist between Turkey and its region, especially when, for example, tensions with the United States occurred. And when you have, for example, the United States that is almost retreating from the world, I think there's a lot of jostling by regional powers in the region. And Turkey is, for example, something that unites these powers together.
Now, to what extent is this issue with Greece historically tainted? I mean, Turkey's president and some high-ranking officials have said a number of times that Turkey's neighbors want to impose a second Sèvres treaty upon Turkey or a second Lausanne treaty. What memories do these two treaties evoke among the average Turk?
It's a contested term, Sèvres in particular. So Sèvres for some is nationalist paranoia. For others, it's actually responsible statecraft, to be aware, to be skeptical, to be careful about other people's intentions. And I lean towards the latter interpretation, in my humble opinion. But these are historical precedents. These things happened. For example, there was a situation where Turkey was fighting against a number of Western imperial powers in the region. So yes, there are some parallels, and history is something to be learned from, of course. Lausanne is a symbol of Turkish independence, and the idea is that Turkey has to kind of defend its rights. No one's going to give it its rights. So these two treaties do form nodes in the Turkish psyche. Historical tensions with Greece have existed, of course, but now, for example, when we have the law of the sea, UNCLOS, and these various maritime boundary delimitation, for example, zones that are available to countries, it's added a new dimension to an existing conflict. So before we had 3 or 6 nautical miles given to islands, but now because of the UN law of the sea, because of UNCLOS, the existing debate has gone into a different dimension, has escalated in scale. And these are issues that are historical, but have found a new lease of life.
Right. Serkan, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledalci, iz Nikozije nam se uključio Serkan Birgel, stručnjak za međunarodne odnose. Mnogo je nesporazuma, kako historijskih, tako i savremenih, između Turske i Grčke. Dva susjeda, članice NATO-a, više puta su se našla na ivici rata. Situacija je danas nešto složenija zbog umješanosti Francuske i Ujedinjenih Arapskih Emirata, zemalja koje su stale na stranu Grčke, ali i zbog nezainteresovanosti Sjedinjenih Američkih Država za rješavanje spora dva važna saveznika. Poštovani gledalci, bilo je to sve u ovom izdanju emisije Granice Istoka. Ako ste propustili bilo koji dio, emisiju možete pogledati na našoj web stranici balkans.aljazeera.net. Hvala na pažnji.